The topic of today's webinar will be the new coordinated entry report that will be due to DHCD for the first 6 months and then at the end of the first year. So once you log into ServicePoint, you will then connect to ART. So you can connect to ART via the link here or through the tab on the left, and then you find the link that says ART. Once you connect to ART, you will then go to the public folder, and then you will scroll down to the custom folder, and in there you will find the DHCD Coordinated Entry Referrals Report. You will come over to the right-hand side on this gray icon, and you will select that, and then ART will connect. And then you will fill in your prompts. So the first prompt that you will complete will be, what provider are you running this report for? So in some cases, you may have more than one project. So you would look for your coordinated entry project. So in the search box, I simply typed the first few letters of the word coordinated. And as you can see, there's quite a few projects in the database that are designated for coordinated entry. Once you find the project that you want to run the report for, you click on it one time, which turns it blue, and then you can use the arrow here in the middle, or you can simply double click on it and it will put the provider to the right-hand side. You will then select your effective date, and your effective date for every report is whatever your end date is. So in this case, I want to run this report from July 1st, 2018 through 12/31/2018. But in ART, your end date always has to include one extra day because ART is essentially 1 day behind. So my end date then, which would also be my effective date, is going to be January 1 of 2019. So I select January 1, 2019. I then select my start date, which will be July 1, 2018. And then I select my end date +1, which will again be January 1st, 2019. Once you complete those prompts, you will then click Run Query. And this is where you will have patience and you will have to wait for ART to actually churn out the report. One thing to keep in mind, if you have slow internet, that process could take several minutes. Once the report completes, you will then go to the left-hand corner, click on the document arrow, come down, save to my computer as Excel, which will then process and put a little picture down here in the left-hand corner. You will then click on that, and you can now view the report and decide whether or not there are any data entry errors. So you will notice that there are several tabs down here, and the Client Summary tab is the tab that you will use when you log into CAMS to actually physically enter the data entry. So you will notice that this report is telling you how many households with children, how many households without children, and a total number of all households. Then it breaks it down by the assessment disposition question, which is answered at time of exit. So as long as you are answering the assessment disposition at exit for your head of household, your household will be counted on this report. So it's broken down by emergency shelter, safe haven, transitional, rapid, PSH, and you will also notice that no answer recorded. If you have numbers in this row, which we do on this report, That means you have a missing assessment disposition for your head of household. So you will then need to go and find which households have that missing answer and go back and complete that question. So this report has a client detail tab. So on this tab is all the information that you can look at, and it's a way of maybe finding any data entry errors that you may have. We also have a household detail tab, and what this tab does, unlike the client detail, which is all clients, the household detail tab breaks it down by households. So these people are grouped together based on their household ID. We then have head of household missing assessment disposition. So back on the summary tab, we had 10 households that had the missing assessment disposition. That is what is reflected on the head of household missing assessment disposition tab. We then have a tab where all people may have a missing assessment disposition question. And the reason why we have it broken out two ways is because right now DHCD is only reporting on the head of household. But in some COCs or local planning areas, you may be entering data for mom and 5 kids. So that means you have to answer the assessment disposition question for 6 people, just like you would answer for any assessment question. So this tab will show you all people that have a missing assessment disposition question. Doesn't mean you have to go in and fix them currently, because again, DHCD is only requiring it to be answered for the head of household. We then have an additional tab called Entry Summary. And this tab we elected to include on the report because this number, as you can see, is a lot larger than the Client Summary tab. That's because that tab was deduplicated, whereas this tab is duplicated. And what that means is it is very possible through coordinated entry that you may have 5 phone calls with the same client. And we felt that that information might be useful, and so we included that as an extra tab. So the Client Summary tab, which was the first tab, is the tab you're going to use when you sit down with CAMS to enter data. The Entry Summary tab is a duplicate of that, but then it is also a duplicate count of all your clients. And then lastly, you always have a tab called Additional Information on every report. And it's always a good idea on this report to just peek at it to make sure that you ran the report for the correct provider and the correct date range that you thought you were running it for. Because a lot of times people put in the wrong effective date, and then they send me an email saying something's wrong, and when we look at this tab, they have a typo on a date field. So it's just always a good idea to peek at it to make sure you ran the report for what you thought you were going to run the report for. And if we go back to the Client Summary tab, I want to point out to you this paragraph right here. If you have no answers for one of the drop-down answers in the assessment disposition question, then that row number will simply not appear on your report. For example, if you had no referrals to street outreach, you would not even see street outreach listed on the report. okay? So when you go into CAMS and there's a row for street outreach, and street outreach is not on your report, that means you had 0 clients, so you enter 0 on the CAMS report page, okay? So I just want to make sure that that is clear. So if you have something on CAMS that you don't have listed here, it's because you had no answers, so it is a 0 answer. And CAMS will expect you to enter a 0, okay? So this report is very simple. It's very easy to run. The information you're keying into CAMS comes right from this tab. You have client details, and you have head of household missing assessment disposition. So that way you can go in and fix any data entry errors that you may have. This concludes the webinar for the Coordinated Entry Report.